So I'm going to start, I like to do my presentations a slightly different way. So I'm going to start with a few stylized facts, which link, I think, quite a lot to the debate that we've just had about does financial education work and what works and what doesn't. And then I'm going to talk about what we're doing to try and address that and to think about the way we can solve that, and particularly what we're doing to try and work out what does solve it and what does address it. So we're going to start with our first fact. And I should say these are stylized facts, which I mean is basically that I'm taking a giant mass of academic literature and research and condensing it into something that is probably an oversimplification. The adults who most need financial education don't tend to look for it. So there are many ways in which you can look at this. The first is that Sharon Collard and I did a study a couple of years ago on our big Managing My Money course and found that it seems to really work. It does actually seem to change behaviour, and it particularly has a big impact on confidence and all the softer type of things. But that the people who take it, as you would expect on any online financial course, have gone and found it. They've chosen it, they've already got an interest in the subject, and they therefore tend to be quite financially capable. We also find prevention is better than cure. And this goes from both a study that I saw that said once you're in severe problem debt, the only way to get out of it is a big salary increase or a windfall of money. It also goes on a much smaller scale about things like payday lending and small saving. We know that if people experience a negative financial shock, they tend to go and borrow the money and they tend to be able to pay it back, even if they think they couldn't afford to save beforehand. And they would be unambiguously better off if they saved first to get a little emergency fund rather than borrowing. Finance is really boring though. Most people don't engage until they hit a trigger event, until they get into difficulty. And given that prevention is better than cure, it is often too late at that point. So one of the big questions that we had is, how do we reach people before they get into trouble, but who lack resilience, who are the people most at risk of getting into trouble? And the common wisdom is that this tends to require intensive, expensive methods. It's not something you can do on a mass market scalable basis. Stylized fact number 2. So when we try and think about, okay, we're going to create something a bit more focused, we need to think about what to focus on. And most of the evidence suggests that resilience, by resilience I generally mean not just living within your means, but living a little bit within your means so that if something bad happens, and we know we systematically underestimate the likelihood of something bad happening to us, whether that's our car breaking down, becoming ill, becoming unemployed, that having that little bit of resilience is one of the most important things in stopping problem debt, but also in our general financial well-being. We also find that experts recommend recommend that you have 3 months of income saved somewhere where you can access it in case of redundancy or illness. So this is guarding against a big shock. About 80% don't do this. In fact, when we think about, I often think about this as a pyramid, where you've got your comfortable, resilient people on the top, about 20% of the population. And you go down and you've got about 10% of the population are in financial trouble. Most of the middle is just about managing. The vast majority of the population think they're just about managing. When the government talks about jams and they're talking about a specific group of people, we're actually talking about the bulk of England, the bulk of the UK. We're talking about most ordinary people. The bottom one I find particularly motivating actually for this, that when we think about a more manageable sum, £1,000 would stop half of all families that get into problem debt doing so. 500,000 people a year in severe difficulty could be prevented. And so when we think about, does financial education work or not, I think even a relatively small reduction in the number of people getting into problem debt is actually quite a major win. Stylized fact number 3. So this is where I think it really comes to the crux of the debate about whether financial education works. We've actually known for some time, and increasingly are finding this out, that the problem with financial capability is more about psychology than it is about knowledge. And I'm going to ask this. So if you ask people what proportion of their income they should save for a rainy day, not thinking about pensions, not thinking about auto-enrollment, what do you think people say? Shout out, please, someone. What do you think the most common answer is? 10%, exactly. Almost everybody says they should save 10% of their income. Actually, if you save 10% of your income for a rainy day, you are doing better than most experts think you need to. The point of this, though, see, spot on, is even most people know the right thing to do, and most people don't do it. The analogy I like to make here is the 5-a-day fruit and veg idea. Over 80% of the population think they should eat 5 portions of fruit or veg a day. Less than 20% of the population do. This is very similar to those who are saving for a rainy day. It is the same problem of delayed gratification. I want nice things now. I'm not willing to forego my nice spending now for a future benefit. Now, the question that we asked ourselves was, can we use this knowledge of behaviour, these behavioural insights that are being developed at a rapid rate? Richard Thaler just won the Nobel Prize in Economics for his pioneering work in behavioural economics. Can we use this to design better interventions? And the main point I really like to stress here is there's often a phrase used about debt, that debt isn't bad, bad debt is bad. I would like to make the same point in relation to the discussion earlier about financial education. It's not that financial education is ineffective, it's that bad financial education is ineffective. And most financial education that has gone, at least kind of looking in decades past, has been focused on knowledge, on exams. And the National Strategy for Financial Capability has changed quite significantly in the last decade to being really focused on attitudes, behaviours, and outcomes. So, what could we do? Well, first thing is, let's use information not to try and impart knowledge, but to try and nudge people to action. It's still using information, but it's different in the choice of information you provide and how you use it. Let's design it for real people, not for the people who actually are designing it themselves. I am interested in finance, it's why I'm standing here and it's why I do my job. I am not an ordinary consumer. I should not be designing a financial education course I would want to do. I should be designing one that works and appeals to somebody who isn't interested in it. Now, this is my little cheat sheet. Behavioural science has got to an incredibly complex level of what works and what doesn't, and most findings are very much context specific. But in general, if you are positive, if you make things immediately relevant, if you keep things short and focused, they tend to be more useful, they tend to appeal more. If you make it real and relatable. And one thing is making it easy. Make it easy to take, don't make people look for it, don't make them find it. And the final thing, which I'm going to stress a lot, is test if it works. And don't just test, does it work, do people like it? Test whether it changes behaviour, test whether it changes outcomes. That's much harder to do, but it's exactly what we need. And it's why I am so thrilled to be able to talk about, now I actually get onto the proper topic, to be able to talk about our What Works Fund project, managing my money. We call it managing my money for the jams. It's often referred to as managing my money for the squeezed. What we've done is we have taken the full Managing My Money course, our flagship course taken by over 250,000 people, which is 8 weeks long, 24 hours of studying. And we've changed it and made it, I believe, about 1/20th of the size. It's about an hour and a half now. In fact, we've stopped calling it a course. It's not a course. It's a guide. It's a tool. It's focused on resilience. It's focused on budgeting. It's focused on showing people that small changes can make a big impact. Small saving, manageable things, and it's focused very much on empowerment, making the most of your money by making active decisions, deciding where you want to spend money. So this is a couple of little tricks that we've put in. There are behavioural tricks throughout, and I'll be happy to talk about them later, but I won't have time to go through all of them. So we have our simple do-it-today list, 7 things that take less than 15 minutes at the end of the course that you can do right now to improve your finances. We've asked a bit at the bottom, a final thought, say one thing you want to do. It's what we call a soft commitment device. By writing it down and saying, I'm going to do this, we become many, many times more likely to do it. None of this is rocket science. This is relatively basic psychology. But applying it to this topic and applying it in this way, I think could have a really positive impact. Even to the extent where we don't tell people, go and open a savings account. We give them 3 links to online savings accounts and tell them to click on one. Removing that barrier of having to go to an extra page makes it much, much easier. Now, the main question I suppose people ask, has it actually worked? Well, we're halfway through our project. It is too soon to tell. We don't have much of the data yet. What we do seem to be finding from our project is that we seem to be increasing savings. We seem to be increasing the use of budgeting. Comparing it to previous research that we've done, it seems to be having a really significant impact on behaviour for those who take it. It seems to be having less of an impact on confidence than previous ones did, because that's not what it's focused on. This is a behaviourally focused tool. But the big problem is getting people to engage. What we've tried to do here, we know that people don't have an interest, so we work with 7 partner organisations to deliver it to people directly. So these are organisations who have an existing relationship with them, from True Potential as an auto-enrolment pension provider, to 3 credit unions, a community group, and a social publishing magazine that provides a wonderful magazine free to social housing tenants. Lots of ways that we're trying to engage. Some of these work, some of these don't. We're trying to be more proactive in pushing that out. And I would like to just say a huge thank you to all of our partners. I know many of them are here tonight. They're doing some absolutely sterling work, testing many different ways of engaging it. The other real benefit of this is that by testing it in 7 different ways, same tool, but delivered in different ways to slightly different parts of our target audience, we get much more generalizable findings of, does this work? For whom does it work? We're doing qualitative work alongside this, which means we get to look at the mechanism, at how it's working, at why it's working. We're also, one of the groundbreaking things from an academic point of view is, I naturally don't really believe much in the way of surveys. I tend to think that if you ask people, did they like a course, they'll want to say yes. That's fine, very, very happy with that. It doesn't necessarily tell you if it works. With this, in most cases, we have objective data. We actually have data from the credit unions, for example, on their customer savings and borrowing, where we can look and see, does taking our course change the amount they save, change the amount they borrow? And we can test it with a control group in a fully randomized way. This is the rare times when you get to have the gold standard of evidence of, does this work in that context. So I would also like to give a very positive thank you to the Money Advice Service for funding this, but also for in general for the What Works Fund. I come from a policy background. It is incredibly rare to see a policy organisation put their money where their mouth is and try and get credible evidence of, is what they're doing working or not? So it's really refreshing to see, and it's been wonderful to be able to do this kind of research. My conclusion, really, can we nudge people before they hit difficulty? It really comes down to, yes, if you can engage them. One of the themes I'm noticing is having a better tool doesn't mean more people will go to you. It is not build it and they will come. But if you can manage to get people to engage with it, you can have a good tool, can have a really big impact on people. The final thing I would say, though, is I think is a theme with Kirsty's presentation as well, that there are more questions that we've found than answers we've uncovered. And that really is that there's a lot more things we need to test. The need for things like follow-ups and more intensive communications, the importance of social links. What we found is that trust is really important here, and that people will use something that they've seen built up. My favourite example here is Money Saving Expert. It started off as a relatively small website, did some marketing at the beginning, but it grew significantly by word of mouth, people using it and it working for them. And so we did, we're hoping to do exactly the same thing here and build on this and build it up that way. And the final question I think I would ask at the bottom is, there's a wonderful article I read by Google's product evangelist talking about his worries that we have some of the smartest people in the world sitting in Silicon Valley trying to get people to spend more time on their phones. And they're very good at it. They're good at being intrusive with apps, with notifications that make you pay attention. With something like financial education, do we need to get to that level of, frankly, annoying intrusiveness if we are to engage most people? If we are to get people to really pay attention, to look at it, to do something? Do we have to make it annoying not to? Or can we still rely on the sort of more positive aspect? So I'd love to test some of these things. We've got many, many more ideas, but I hope that's given you a flavour of what we're doing and of some of the basic things that we're starting to find so far. Thank you very much.